Here we see King Edward's crown, featuring Maltese crosses and the fleur-de-lis of the French Templars and the French royal houses, and the crown surrounds the so-called cap of maintenance. The word maintain means to perpetuate or keep in order until some other event occurs, or until the arrival of a sovereign of greater rank. Interestingly, the very word entertain also connotes the same idea: to entertain in the interim, before the main event occurs. But in whose name or place does the Queen and her court preside, and maintain the state as stewards or caretakers? Within Westminster Abbey hang the banners and pennants of the many knightly families owing allegiance to the royal families of Britain. These bear many ancient astrotheological motifs, and we can also note the inverted crosses on the right-hand side behind the banners. Here we see Phoenician images showing the raised hand that was later incorporated into the design for the flag of Northern Ireland. Allegedly, the raised red hand was a symbol of the O'Neill clan of Ireland, but in fact it long predates the time of the Gaelic conquest of Ireland. Here we see the hand as the crest of the despotic and wayward Winston Churchill, a man who couldn't make up his mind what side of the political spectrum he could find a home. Kabbalistic imagery is also used during the coronation ceremony. The Queen is positioned at the center of 6 maidens or ladies-in-waiting. The form of the procession is reminiscent of the Kabbalistic tree of life, which we can see on the right. The procession then passes through the second portal into the church towards the altar. The company pass along a blue carpet symbolizing water, the river of life, time or knowledge, etc. Interestingly, the word Hebrew, as we saw in part 1, means the men of the river. Passing through the inner door towards the altar, we see the red train of the Queen held by her 6 ladies. This red train symbolizes the line of kings and queens historically preceding the Queen. She is the end of the royal bloodline, the so-called dragon court that stretches back past the time of Akhenaten to even more distant ages. And as we saw, the lion, or sometimes the dragon or the serpent of the Habsburg dynasty, to whom the Queen is related. We saw that the Windsors are also related to the Beauce-Lyon family, and the Battenbergs, and the Saxe-Coburg-Gothas, and the Hanoverian House of Orange, to the Savoys and Angevins and Capetians, and the Guelphs, who were known as the Black Venetian dynasties. The procession approaches the first set of steps. There are 6 to climb. This represents a Star of David, or, more correctly, of Aton. After this ascent, the Queen moves slowly towards the members of the Protestant clergy, standing before the altar and 2 thrones. On the backs of the robes of the bishops, we see the letters IHS. These letters are believed to represent Jesus Christ, but in fact they derive from the Irish god Iessa or Isus, as well as from the Grecian and Roman god Dionysus or Bacchus, upon whom the Christian Jesus was partly based. The Queen approaches the clergyman and the altar. Above the altar, with the sacred emblems of royalty, is a balcony where the family members of the Queen are seated. They rise in courtesy as she approaches. The red train is meticulously laid down, and she turns to the Bible. Beside her stand 4 knights with 4 swords. They represent the compass points. The symbolism of the sword is complex. It is primarily a Martian symbol, although it also connotes the intellect and the acquisition of knowledge. Here we see the Dindira zodiac, one of the most ancient zodiacs in the world, and it shows the 12 signs of the zodiac and the 4 cardinal points. This zodiac was dedicated to the female goddesses Hathor and Isis. We recognize the four knights, or the four stewards, not only as the four directions of heaven, but as the four sons of Horus. There they are, in front of the Pharaoh, in front of Osiris. There, beneath the seat of Osiris, we see the wavy lines of the water. The same idea as the blue carpet, which we saw in the procession. But there in front of the Pharaoh, in front of the noble one, or the king enthroned, we see the four sons, so-called sons of Horus, which represent the four cardinal directions of heaven, perhaps the four elements, and also the four hemispheres of consciousness. The Queen is presented for recognition. She moves towards the St. Edward's chair. At this time, the Archbishop of Canterbury will present her before the people for recognition. This is an astromantic ritual in which the Queen represents the moon and the Archbishop the sun. His light illumines or recognizes her as the sun does the moon. The chair of St. Edward is another ancient Irish symbol. It's the coronation seat of Tara and is of Atonist origins. It was used in Ireland after the Milesians, or the Atonists, conquered the land around 600 BC. During this astrological ritual, the Queen faces each of the compass points in turn, while the same question is proclaimed as to whether she is accepted as regent by those gathered at the 4 points of the world. The Queen is asked by the Archbishop if she will swear before the people to keep the promises she has made, to rule her realms and territories with justice and rightness. The Queen answers, "All this I promise to do." The Queen proceeds towards the altar to kneel and swear before God that she will keep her oath. She kisses the Bible, which appears to be opened at an early chapter. Immediately after the Bible is removed, another book is brought forth, in which she signs her name. After being addressed by the Scottish minister, the Queen has her crimson robe removed. She rises and proceeds towards St. Edward's chair, behind a knight carrying a sword. This is the moment before the anointing. During the televised coronation, the narrator described the anointing ceremony as a moment so old that history can scarcely go deep enough to contain it. This curious description tells us that the rite preceded the time of Christ. That is what is being implied subtextually. And we may ask, what dynasty or empire, known to anoint its kings and queens, was so old that history itself cannot fathom it? Is the narrator referencing and suggesting pre-Diluvian empires? The Queen anointed, blessed, and consecrated, said the narrator of the televised ceremony in 1953. There it is, the chair of St. Edward, the Irish seat of kings, that arrived in England by way of Scotland, and it stands upon 4 Atonist lions. The back of the chair is suggestively pyramidical. On the right we see the updated, remodeled chair, with a symbol of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, and above it the pyramid with the circle inside of it. Irish and Egyptian symbolism. We see the Tudor roses, and we see the Knights of Malta cross on top of the crown. And talking of thrones, long before the throne of the lion was used, we have the goat throne, used by kings and priests long before the symbol of the lion became a symbol of royalty. As Frank Higgins in his Ancient Freemasonry says, the god Horus was often represented with the horns of both a ram and a goat. And as we saw in part 1, the horned animals were sacred to the ancient Arya. Here on the pictures on the right we see the Knights of Malta cross, or the cross. We see the goat, or gazelle-like creature. On the image above we see the bull, and below the bull we see the goat, the little goat, standing beside the seated dignitary, the astrologer kings, the priest king. And as we saw, the Western Arya, they were the Phoenicians, the Goths, and the early Scythian Gaels. They all worshipped the horned animal. In particular, they revered the goat and the stag. The very name Scythian comes from Saka, from which we derive such terms as sacred and sage. The syllable S-A-C and also sak or zak connoted the stag. The syllable appears in the word Saxon. This word originally denoted the sages and not the men of the spears. The syllable appears in names such as Isaac. This is correctly rendered Ish-sak, meaning man of the Saka, man of the sages, the Magi, the prophets, or the wise ones. Well, does this imply that the Old Testament characters Isaac, Jacob, and Abraham, who allegedly entered Egypt from Babylon, were in fact Western Scythians? In our mind, it does indeed imply that.